Indeed, good morning to you all. This is a very special occasion because you are the ultimate example of how dedicated the research community can be to making, a difference in tackling the challenges that we are all confronted with. And obviously, I'm talking about, our response or collective response to the pandemic. And that said, the newspapers are, at least the headlines in the newspapers, are focused on different events, unfortunately, of course. But that doesn't mean that the pandemic has completely disappeared. In Europe now, at least, I think Western Europe certainly, but I think in all parts of Europe, we are relatively re-enjoying our freedom, as we were used to, although we remain vigilant. But in other parts of the world, and particularly in China, for example, there are serious long-term lockdowns. And this is a global phenomena. And it goes without saying that it is very difficult to predict how the developments will manifest in the coming period. But here we are, a very special occasion, because you are coming together as a network of networks. It is, I think, very, very inspiring to see that this was the result of a bottom-up initiative that we immediately embraced, and more actions joined, I think 77 in total. So we have about 300 actions running. So this really, demonstrates the clear commitment to leveraging, let's say, science to tackling the problem. And of course, not only from a single discipline point of view, but it is completely, multidisciplinary. And there's a whole mosaic of elements or aspects that play a role. Of course, the hardcore biomedical science, for example, but at the same time, there are also actions that have looked at completely different aspects, like conspiracy theories. So this makes it so interesting and really, very much showcasing our drive for interdisciplinarity. You know that we have, of course, foster interdisciplinarity within the actions, but now bringing together so many actions on a topic. This is, I would almost say the prime example. That said, of course, we on the side of COST have also tried to navigate this pandemic for you. I recall that the moment that we, it was in March 2 years ago, that we suddenly were confronted with a wave coming in, and people getting caught in situations where they booked their travels, but their employer, for example, suddenly said, well, you're no longer allowed to travel, or the organizer said, no, we are not going to organize this event. But still, there you are with your expenditures, and these were not covered because the activity did not take place. So in the end, we found a solution within our membership to compensate those people that were basically confronted with this very unpleasant situation. I think we also did a fairly good job in ensuring the continuity, at least of the services that we provided to you by organizing different meetings online. For example, the COST Academy, we leveraged a lot of training modules online. It was relatively easy to do. But what was less trivial is that we have, in the meantime, since the pandemic started, welcomed about 100 new actions. And you know very well that, you have these kickoff meetings where it's not only the group of proposers, but you have so many new people you've never seen before. And we organize this meeting to help you to get organized as quickly as possible. And to do that completely online is I think not trivial, but appreciated. So no, let's say, time lost for the new actions. We really felt very strongly about that. We received positive feedback. We also have piloted virtual networking grants, I would say. A pilot was conducted, and now under the Horizon Europe umbrella, where we have a new contract with the European Commission, these are mainstreamed. So in the end, it's not only about ensuring business continuity, but at the same time, try to innovate. But we still have to see how you as Actions and many other Actions, of course, are making use of the toolkit. So that's also something that we will closely monitor. Now, that said, I think we have an excellent, let's say, panel today with very renowned experts. Also, I would like to thank, in particular, Dominique van der Kerkhoven, who has from the beginning volunteered, also being able to build up her own expertise. I think you are going to give a little bit of an intro in a moment, so I will try to stick around for a bit longer. And I really hope that we all will get out of this situation for good. I also really hope that all the contributions that you made to reflect on the pandemic will be useful in any future pandemics, hopefully not too soon, that might manifest, and thereby making real good contribution also to the policy making agenda, because very soon we will have an event in the European Parliament on the future of pandemic, and it's a joint event between COST and the European Parliament Research Service. So you see that what you have been doing is also made visible to the policymakers in European Parliament. I'm sitting there only to welcome, just like now, but it is you who are making the contributions. So that immediately prompts me to round up from my side and give full floor to all of you. I would just like to remain by thanking you from the bottom of our heart that you took such a spontaneous initiative in responding to the challenge. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very fruitful and informative session.
Thank you very much, Ronald. And indeed, very much thanks also to my colleague Dominique van der Kerkhoven and to Professor Chiara Riganti, who are our next speakers. And we will hear from them about the COVID network of actions and how it started and developed. We will have then our speakers with examples of actions participating. So for 1 hour, we will have presentations followed by a round of question and answers. But first, I would give the floor to my colleague, Dominique van der Kerkhoven. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelo. And maybe I should add that Angelo is the current coordinator for the Network of Actions. So I am sharing my screen if all goes well. And you should be seeing my slides. Is that okay? Yeah, all right. So my name is Dominique van der Kerkhoven, and I'm the one who was coordinating the Network of Actions from April 2020 to October 2021. It all started at the end of March 2020, as Ronald already explained. COST Association started contacting the Actions and asking them about COVID-19 related research. We had many respondents very quickly, and within 1 week, we already had 12 actions identified. And as of early April, COST started coordinating the available information. We called it very quickly the Network of Actions on COVID-19. The objectives of this Network of Actions are to coordinate the available information and to facilitate especially interdisciplinary collaboration and help speed up, of course, also the potential outputs. The scope is COVID-19, as you can imagine, but also impact of pandemics in general, and it covers all scientific fields. Right now we have 77 actions involved, 12 fields of expertise are covered, and they are highly diverse. You will see that in one of the next slides. The actions are highly active, and their outputs have been the topic of several COST newsletters. These slides will be put at your disposal after the webinar, and through these links you will have easy access to all this information. We also have a booklet which reached its 3rd edition in December last year, which gives you all the information of the actions involved and on their activities. One of the things you will find in the booklet is this nice overview of the different fields of activity. We have 12. You can see they are highly diverse. And the percentage shows the relative representation in the network of these fields of expertise. Also shown in the booklets are the connections between the actions in the network. Each line represents one or more management committee members active in more than one action. There is one action specifically, cost action 17104, that I need to mention. This is cost action stratagem working on new diagnostic and therapeutic tools against multi-drug resistant tumors. When we contacted the actions end of March 2020, one of the first to respond was this cost action stratagem. They were already coordinating research efforts within the action, and they asked COST if COST would be willing to facilitate contacts with other actions. And this was actually the little push that brought us to the entire coordination activity and the creation of the network of actions. Very quickly, Stratagem was coordinating the activities between 9 actions, which you see listed below on this slide. And they had several outputs. One of them is shown at the bottom of the slides, the publication Joining European Scientific Forces to Face Pandemics. It was published in 2021. And with that, I am very pleased to give the floor to the Action Chair of Cost Action Stratagem, Professor Chiara Riganti.
Thank you very much, Dominique, for the introduction. I just share my screen. I hope you can see them.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you for the invitation to presenting our very, very informal initiative of joining different cost action in 2020. Thanks to the internal COVID-19 task force of Stratagem, directed by Professor Helena Vasconcelos and Dr. Thomas Moore. So, start from the beginning. In March 2020, when the first COVID-19 pandemics arrived in Europe, as a scientist, we feel the need to do something and to discover something, trying to discriminate between fake news and real scientific facts. At the same time, we have an unprecedented amount of funding to invest in COVID-19 research, although not all of us were virologists or experts in viral infection. So we analyzed the situation and we thought that we had at least 4 limitations to proceed in this way. We couldn't have at the beginning a comprehensive multinational platform to facilitate interdisciplinary discussion and collaboration. At least at the beginning, the reliable scientific information was scattered, and we have no good coordination between laboratories around Europe with complementary expertise and research. And all the research institutions and hospitals start to collect the information of COVID-19, but very slowly because, of course, they must face a very huge health emergency. So they have no time to share this data. We reasoned that a possible solution was to organize an inclusive platform to allow inter- and transdisciplinary expertise on emerging infectious disease, not only limited to COVID-19, to exchange scientific information and expertise and propose possible plan to react in quick time to clinical infectious diseases. And we believe that this approach will give reciprocal benefits for both scientists and possible stakeholders. So we exploited the pillars of cost association, the multidisciplinarity, the inclusiveness, the excellence, and the flexibility. In each action, we have scientists that are focused on a specific problem, but we have also multiple and complementary expertise. And most importantly, the network are open, meaning that you can join already existing action. So exploiting this multidisciplinarity and flexibility, we propose a very informal trans-cost action network, and we ask to Cost Association to ask for other action who can participate in this network. Thanks to the support of the Cost Association, after 1 month, we have the expression of interest of at least 9 cost action with up to 3,000 researchers with different expertise from RNA-based marker discovery to delivery of therapeutic drug, to new drug development and repurposing, to network medicine and artificial intelligence, to the consequence of post-virus syndrome, not only at health level, but also at social and economical level, to model that help us in study the pathogenesis of viral infection, on viral interaction and invasion, and to the development of antimicrobial coating solution. So we start with a kickoff meeting. We generate a survey of expertise to collect the expertise among all these 3,000 researchers. We start with periodic online meeting, and we develop the researcher in 6 working groups, working on epidemiology, prevention, pathogenesis, diagnosis and treatment, vaccine and other immunological studies, and new drug development and treatment. From this interaction, proactive collaboration started. And we have a good interaction between the basic research tool, the clinical activities, and the public health issue. Because basic research can provide tool and expertise in terms of cellular model, techniques to study viral pathogenesis, drug target prediction, virtual drug screening, synthesis of drug and antimicrobial solution, discovery of biomarker, and also the tool of computational modeling and artificial intelligence that can support clinical activities and decision making in public health. And from clinical activities and public health, we can receive a feedback how to redirect our research to improve our knowledge about this unknown virus. So which were the first result? Of course, the scientific publication that Dominic mentioned. We produced 2 open access software, the COVAX software that predict the possible interaction between the virus protein and the host protein with knowledge about the pathogenesis and the damage induced by the virus. And the DRADIS-C database that aim to repurpose already existing drug that are predicted to have a potential antiviral impact. We were involved in the preparation of national recommendation for COVID-19 mitigation in some states. And then we started to apply to grant and obtain some funding. At long term, our goal is to draft a roadmap of discipline to identify the expertise that can mount a fast response to infective emergency and a network of laboratories that can switch from their typical research toward diagnosis and treatment and prevention of SARS-CoV-2 and other infection, building a core set of transdisciplinary tools available to all the scientific community for COVID-19 and future pandemics. And this is important in these days where, for instance, a new hepatitis is appearing. It's of unknown origin, like it's viral. So I don't hope that we will face a new pandemics, but we have another infective disease of unknown origin. So exploiting these tools and resources, we have obtained the clinical and epidemiologically big data on COVID-19 and hopefully on infective diseases. And we start develop new pharmacological strategies and new antimicrobial solution for COVID-19 and other infective diseases. Of course, our network are in collaboration with other network outside Europe. But most importantly, I'm happy to say that the COST Association created the NOAA, Network of Action, that has, as already mentioned by Dominic, 70 COST action with 12 fields of expertise. I should stress that, of course, this network is flexible and open, so every new expertise is welcome and could really give a big advantage in facing these pandemics and eventual future pandemics. Finally, I would like to thank the COST Association for the initial support and the constant support for our initiative, and you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chiara and Dominique, for the introduction to the Network of Actions and for all the work you've done in these 2 years. So next we will hear from some of the participating actions in the network. And as we saw, there is a diverse range of areas. So we have 3 speakers, and we will hear about public policy, health, and working spaces. So first I would give the floor to Dr. Marcin Lewiński, who is Action Chair of APPLY, a COST action on public policy. So thank you, Marcin. The floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everybody. And I'll really just speak for 1 minute, because the way we arranged it is that my co-chair of our action, so the European Network for Argumentation and Public Policy Analysis, who was also an editor-in-chief of a special volume, he pre-recorded a video. He cannot be here with us because he's teaching. So this 1 minute, I want to say with all due humility to what Chiara was just presenting, we are an action of social scientists and humanity people. I'm trained as a philosopher and Steve is trained as a linguist. You could see that was right at the bottom of what Dominique presented, 2%. There's very few COST actions in this discipline. And when the pandemic started, immediately the notion of infodemic that is used as a metaphor for the problems of public discourse and communication related to pandemic started. And we thought that it's interesting, given our expertise in linguistics, communication, law studies, to investigate what's happening on the level of public debate about COVID. So it's nothing as important as what you're doing in the fundamental medical science, life sciences, but we're doing our bit. We have a book now published, and I will ask Anna to play the video that Steve pre-recorded. Thank you so much, and I'm available for questions later.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Oswald. I cannot be here with you today because I'm teaching, so I thought I'd just record this short presentation of the book, The Pandemic of Argumentation. This book is the result of a joint effort. I'm a lead co-editor on this because I'm the one who likes to write emails of the bunch. but this is work conducted with Marcin Lewiński from the Universidade Nova de Lisboa, who's also the chair of our action, Sara Greco, who's at the Università della Svizzera Italiana in Switzerland, and Serena Villata, who is from the University Côte d'Azur CNRS in France. Let me start with a few figures and facts about this book. This is volume 43 of a book series published by Springer titled Argumentation Library, devoted to the study of argumentation at large, and it's an open access publication that has 371 pages, 17 chapters with one introduction. Over the course of the production of this book, I received 891 emails and probably answered a few more. 74 people were involved on the scientific side in the production of this. I'm counting here co-editors, contributors, of course, but, and very gratefully, reviewers. Every paper was blindly reviewed by 2 people. So far, we've had 23,000 downloads and counting. Please, if you want to read this book, just Google Pandemic of Argumentation, and that should be your first hit, and you will be able to download it for free. This is a bit our baby. It really literally took us 9 months in between the call for papers and the submission of the final manuscript to come up with this work. 14 months until publication, but still, it really felt like, well, I'm not the best person placed to be discussing this, to be making the analogy, but we like to think this of like our baby, the baby of the action. We initially received 36 abstracts, of which 27 were accepted. Those led to 24 chapters, full chapters submitted. After review, 18 were accepted with revisions, 6 were rejected, and 1 was withdrawn by the authors. So that gives us a bit less than a 50% acceptance rate. By some indicators, this should be good. Let me tell you first about our COST action, the European Network for Argumentation and Public Policy Analysis. I'm just going to read out loud something you find on the website because I think it's nicely put to summarize our activities. The European Network for Argumentation and Public Policy Analysis, APPLY, that's the acronym, improves the way European citizens understand, evaluate, and contribute to public decision-making on such matters of common concern as climate change or energy policies and pandemics. So it just so happened. Addressing this need from a multidisciplinary perspective on argumentation, the APPLY action identifies gaps between the citizens, policymakers, and scholarly experts' argumentation and explores ways of treating them. Feel free to check our website. It has more information on what we do. The key term here is argumentation. We are over 200 people now in the action, interested in how people justify their choices, thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, and so on. This is our topic of research. The action is structured in 3 working groups. The first, titled Empirical Study of Public Argumentation, describes argumentation as it unfolds in different domains, in different contexts, be they political, media, legal, institutional, or private. So it's really a descriptive task of knowing more about how people publicly argue in different circumstances. The second working group is constituted of mostly philosophers and linguists, and we are busy in that group with norms of public argument. We try to identify what makes an argument a good argument when it comes to promoting values of public deliberation. And the third working group is more practically oriented. It's concerned with designing public argumentation and policy making. So people working in that working group are interested in designing better practices, that should be conducive to better policy making processes. So why this book by us? Well, it was the UN Secretary who said back in April 2020 that the COVID-19 epidemic was also witnessing a dangerous epidemic of misinformation. And with that, he had in mind, well, the now traditional fake news, conspiracy theories, but we also can count amongst those communicative problems an over-dependence on online communication, which should not be promoted. Lots of phenomena of polarization and increasing polarization between different factions, different groups promoting or rejecting certain measures. We were exposed to lots of contradictory messages. Masks, yeah, we don't really need them, and then yes, we do need them. There was a gradual erosion of public trust in science. I'll come back to this in a few moments. At the same time, the context of scientific uncertainty, we didn't really know what this virus was, how it spread, what it did, how we could fight it. And that context failed to provide the answers people and policymakers needed in order to make way and make progress. Now, all of these communicative circumstances were quite specific, and even if we were used to it before, with the pandemic, it all became exacerbated. And these circumstances affected institutional, political, legal, and media discourse across the world. So we thought that an argumentative perspective on communication was ideally suited to assess those problems, because all those messages were about justifying policies, justifying beliefs, measures, and so on. So our chief question was quite vague at first, and it was really to know what exactly happened to public argumentative practices during the pandemic, because that provides an exemplary case study for learning more about the nature and quality of global communication in times of crisis. The book is accordingly divided in 3 parts. I'm not going to go through all of this, but you have the 3 parts here. The first is about describing how we have argued over pandemic issues, with issues ranging from what counts as a COVID death. We need that. We need to define that for statistics, for measure justification, for policy making. And governments have been quite bad and unsystematic at defining what a COVID-19 death is. Is it someone who died with the virus? Is it someone who died because of the virus? And countless other possibilities. We have also papers discussing the role of experts, how they were presented, how their role was assessed in the public eye, whether we can trust them or not. And we have seen in different countries a lot of experts fighting in the media, supporting different viewpoints, and that was problematic. We have also chapters looking at how policymakers justify their measures officially, and so on. The second part was devoted to the justification and promotion of health policies, and counts many case studies in different domains that show how what we should do was explained and justified. So we have cases, the first 2 chapters looked at legal context in Italy. The last chapter of that part looks at how lay people argue in Israel over the decisions that they make, whether they should go visit relatives or not, whether they should observe the lockdown or not. Anyway, there's a lot of case studies that we can learn from to see how people in their official capacity or their private capacity have reacted to the pandemic and have tried to argue for their the righteousness of their behavior, for instance. The third part is more practically oriented and sort of improving and promoting argumentative literacy, is related to this idea that if we want people to, and if we want societies and countries and institutions to react better to a crisis like a pandemic, people need to be good at arguing and to know what good arguing is and what its role should be, i.e. upholding public deliberation values. So here we have papers looking at what we can do to combat conspiratorial thinking, to make sure that conspiracy theories do not have a nefarious influence on public affairs. We have people looking at how we should take all the information into account, how we should conceive of expertise with its limits, and how to better represent what experts do in order not to accuse them of things that they are powerless over. So these are the three main parts, the three big parts of the book. I'm going to quickly go through some results. Overall, what emerges is that globally, there has been a lack of reasonableness in argumentation over COVID-19 discourse in media and institutional discourse, be it policy making, politics, and other institutions. That goes from labeling COVID deaths to justifying health policies, to also crafting public messages urging for policy compliance, because those are tricky. You don't want people, you don't want to sound patronizing, but you don't want people to think that you're not serious. There's a balance to be reached there, and we have seen in countless places that this hasn't worked really well. The same with how to combat conspiracy theories, because they are detrimental to sound public deliberation. The other big thing that emerged is the question of expertise and how weak experts looked in the media. For instance, because they were led to publicly disagree by being interviewed and by participating in debates when the state of knowledge, scientific knowledge at the time, was not satisfactory to conduct those debates. The result of that is that experts look weak because they don't seem to agree. And they are somehow expected by public opinion and by lay people and the media to know things when actually they didn't, which is normal for science. There's a step in science where you don't know what's happening, and the task of science is trying to disentangle these things. We also saw that the relation between expertise and policymaking is much more intricate and complex than we initially thought. It's not just that experts provide truth and then policymakers make their policies based on that. It's much more complex than that. And we should be aware of that in order to better manage crisis and pandemics, as it were. All this calls for efforts in the development of what we call argumentative literacy skills, critical thinking, how to argue properly, how to recognize that arguments you are exposed to are flawed or good. Basically, it's about making better judgments and sound judgments when we are exposed to arguments. Ideally, this should make us promote healthy and rigorous assessment of trust in authorities and experts. We should know more about how they work, what they do, what is a reasonable expectation from an expert, and so on. We should also incorporate the knowledge that we have of all these new media ecologies in the design of public measures and policies so that they become more attuned to the specificities of the channels by which they are distributed and to better reach their addressees. As an end note, who is this book for? Anyone interested in how people, media, and institutions have argued over COVID-19, of course, but more specifically to scholars interested in pandemic and crisis communication, also policymakers, because there's a lot of case studies in there that we can learn from. What people did, what institutions did, what policymakers did, what stakeholders did that didn't seem to work really well, and with also thoughts on how to improve that. And basically this is done around the phenomenon of argumentation, how people justify their claims, and how the idea is to show and give insights on how to improve argumentation at the public level. That's all for me. Thank you for your time. Marcin will be happy to take questions. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you, Marcin, and thanks to Steve for his contribution. In fact, congratulations for over 23,000 downloads in 2 months is an excellent result. And just a reminder, I remember when you shared with us the book, and all the participating actions have received it. So it's a perfect example of the communication that we at COTS we are happy to facilitate among the actions. So for all of you who have information that you want to share, please feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to help for that. Another note, I see that there are questions in the chat, so feel free to use it. We will have time at the end for questions to all our speakers. So now I would though give the floor to our next speaker, who is Mr. Brent Wiper, who's the Science Communication Coordinator for the European Burden of Disease Network. So, Mr. Wiper, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share the screen just now. Thanks.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, hopefully everyone can see this now. So thanks very much for the introduction and the opportunity to present our work in this webinar today. I'm Grant Wiper. I'm a public health advisor from Public Health Scotland. And today I'm here on behalf of our Cost Action, where I'm the Science Communication Manager. We are the European Burden of Disease Network, more commonly known as Burden EU. And this morning I'll present our activities related to network activities on COVID-19. So at present, just a little information on our action. Our action currently has 343 members represented by 56 countries and international organisations. And they've just included a picture of our largest network gathering to date, and it's the last major physical event that we held for network members in Copenhagen in February 2020, just before coronavirus changed our lives completely. So our network's interested in the study of DALYs, and DALYs are a population health metric and a sort of needs index for population needs. And DALYs are the shorthand for disability adjusted life years. DALYs look to incorporate both the impact of morbidity and mortality in a comparable way. So for morbidity, it's made by taking into account the frequency and severity of disease and injury. And for mortality, years of life lost estimates are estimated by taking into account the frequency of death and the age upon which it occurs, which recognises that deaths at younger ages have a higher public health impact. And to estimate DALYs, we sum YLD and YLL together to give us an estimate of the full healthy years lost due to living with and dying from causes of disease and injury. I've included a graphic here which would show how DALYs would be expected to accumulate over the life course. So from kind of early ages, from birth onwards, we don't really suffer on average that much health loss, particularly in high income countries. So early in the life course, it would mostly be YLD, which the population are suffering from. And the earlier ages, these are usually acute or episodic harms, things such like headaches, injuries, and things that tend to occur in short duration, although there are obviously exceptions. And as we age, the impact of a wide range of chronic diseases start to have a cumulative adverse impact on our health and well-being. And ultimately, this leads to early death, which is where the YLL component comes in. The reason why we're really interested in the study of DALYs is that they incorporate both morbidity and mortality. And by doing this, we can start to make comparisons between causes of both morbidity and mortality, which weren't possible before. So an example of this is trying to trade off population health needs for, say, depression versus lung cancer. Whichever metric you use, it's likely to be highly biased because depression tends to only cause morbidity, whereas lung cancer is very fatal. So since DALYs consider both these aspects, it makes it a very useful indicator to inform debate around informing public health priorities. So early in the pandemic within our network, we identified two key issues in how we could support, how our work could support the COVID-19 efforts. And this were how can existing burden of disease assessments provide support. If we just think back, we've already said that DALYs is a population vulnerability or health needs index. So that's helpful to keep in mind. And also because COVID-19 was novel, how do we start to integrate COVID-19 into burden of disease assessments and think about how we would start to estimate DALYs due to COVID-19? So this is how our network's currently structured. We have a transversal cross-cutting structure of 3 vertical pillar working groups. Working group 1 focuses on non-communicable diseases and injuries. Working group 2 focuses on communicable disease and infection. Working group 3 it focuses on risk factors, and then we have 2 horizontal pillars which cut across all 3 vertical working groups, which are the methodology which underpins all 3, and then the knowledge translation working group, which is looking to make effective use of the estimates which are being produced. So COVID-19 actually presented a real opportunity to integrate within our working group. We think about, again, that DALYs are a good measure, a good metric for population health needs. Then particularly our working group 1, which looks at non-communicable disease and injury, and to an extent working group 3 could be focused on how population, using existing burden of disease estimates, how can we see how populations may be vulnerable to COVID-19? Working group 2 was well placed to then take forward the work on COVID-19 DALYs to try and integrate COVID-19 as a cause of disease into burden of disease assessment. And working group 3 we haven't done much work in this yet, but it could consider the indirect pandemic harms of COVID-19 on the likes of non-communicable diseases and injuries from working group 1 and other communicable diseases from working group 2. So just thinking back to the activities of working group 1 and the fact that DALYs are a good population health needs index. So early in the pandemic, didn't know too much about COVID, but evidence started to emerge on the potential risk factors for COVID and the underlying health conditions which may lead to severe outcomes from COVID-19. And many governments across the world started publishing lists of people that might be clinically vulnerable or at higher risk. So we utilised the Global Burden of Disease study. They provide estimates of the burden of disease by each cause of disease for all locations of the world. And we took the list of health conditions which were thought to lead to severe outcomes from COVID, and we then carried out a rapid assessment to see which countries might be most vulnerable to COVID-19, also taking into account that it looked like age was the main driver. So we were looking to really see, not just looking at age, but if populations, the extent to which populations might be more unhealthy or vulnerable, they may lead to worse outcomes from COVID. And this work was published in the Archives of Public Health in May 2020 and featured as a COST news item. So once we'd published that, we focused our efforts into trying to create methods for integrating COVID-19 as a cause of disease in burden of disease assessment. So really looking to start assessing COVID-19 DALYs. We started off by looking at mortality only because much information started to emerge on those that were dying of COVID were dying at elderly ages, and the fact that they may have been in a care home institute or not had implications for whether they were going to die soon anyway. This is really against the burden of disease, the way that we treat causes of disease and injury and burden of disease, because since we're looking to make comparisons, we really need to treat all causes of disease and injury in a similar way. So we published an article in the International Journal of Public Health just emphasising this, and it was a step forward in trying to establish COVID-19 DALYs, because because many of our members were looking for guidance at this point. We took that a step further in later 2020, and we started to incorporate the morbidity component. So for those that weren't dying of COVID, what was the health loss that they were suffering from say, a community infection or a hospitalized infection, which would be greater health loss to those that were hospitalized with intensive care. And more recently, we've focused back on the YLL and mortality component, because it seems that there's a lot of people are looking to treat COVID very differently in how they calculate their YLL estimates. And this really has implications for both comparability, because you can't treat COVID differently and then compare it to something which you're not willing to treat in the same way. And it also has implications for equitability, because most of the people that are at highest risk with COVID are likely to die early anyway. But this has implications if we start to make decisions based upon valuing life in this manner, because we'll end up writing off potential decisions to treat those that need it the most. So in addition to this, we support our network members through a published protocol and through burden of disease training schools. So the protocol, we've developed a protocol which is largely based upon the published papers to assist countries to undertake their own national assessments. However, we take it a step further, and we look to provide some more guidance around about the data requirements and how to communicate results. And we also have case studies which encourage kind of knowledge sharing and sharing of expertise that the journal papers, we can include in the journal papers. In terms of the training schools were always something which we're going to undertake, but COVID-19 has been quite a good example, because we can take people from start to finish and start to build up capacity for people to undertake these assessments. So it's really about skilling up people to undertake their own burden of disease assessments. And these were initiated as virtual training schools at first, but are now being undertaken physically. We've just recently had one in Slovenia, and there's one in May in Georgia, which is focused on COVID-19. So again, just to bring everyone together within our network, we created a COVID-19 task force. And this is open to all network members that are conducting or interested in implementing their own national study. We have regular group meetings, and we advertise this network a lot so that new members to the network can join if they need the support. And in particular, when countries are undertaking their own studies, we have ad hoc meetings with those country-specific study teams just to ensure for harmonisation and compatibility of methods. We also discuss other related research projects or ideas for the future for COVID-19 DALYs, and that includes upcoming evidence on long COVID. We initiated early in the pandemic an online discussion forum to try and get people to share their thoughts around about things more often when people couldn't make Zoom calls and things like that. And since we've initiated all these activities, several studies have either been launched or completed. The real benefit is the harmonised approach that all studies have taken, which allow for comparability of estimates. So to date, we have 5 completed studies and within our network, and that's Netherlands, Scotland, Germany, Malta, and Republic of Ireland. We currently have, those studies are published in peer-reviewed journals. The Republic of Ireland paper was a preprint, but it's just been accepted. We've currently got 2 studies under review in France and Denmark, and we currently have ongoing studies in Sweden, Cyprus, and Belgium. There are some studies which I've not included here, but they haven't initiated from our network, but they have cited our network methods and have adopted them. So the impact of our work's actually much wider than those within our network. Also, early in the pandemic, to represent that there were other burden of disease activities ongoing out with our network, we started a COVID-19 research repository on our webpage. This was really to capture anything related to COVID-19 DALYs or DALY methods. And this is open to all our network members to see, and it's very helpful when they start to write their assessments up, because then they can see what's been published and start to make comparisons. So at the moment, we've got 3 methodological peer-reviewed research papers there. We have 26 research papers in total relating to COVID-19 DALYs. This is much more than you've seen in the slide before. Several countries have published multiple papers. So including Scotland, we focused on inequalities in the COVID-19 burden. So it doesn't relate to 26 individual country efforts. We've also been trying to collate non-peer reviewed research so that we can try to make other comparisons. So there's 2 institutional reports there from the Netherlands and Australia, and there's 6 other preprint papers. So we're actively searching the literature to add anything that we think might be either of interest or comparable. In addition to those activities, we launched a webinar series to try and connect our members throughout the pandemic. And to date, we've hosted 2 public webinars on COVID, which were each attended by over 100 participants. They included invited speakers from Scotland, Korea, Germany, and the Netherlands. And the first one was really around about the methods. So that was just to bring people together to try and share the consensus methods, and then trying to tease out any concerns that might have been at that stage. But then the latter webinar was really focused on those countries that had started to publish their assessments, or at least had results that they could share. And in addition to this, we've also shared our work at the workshops, so focused on methodology and application at the 2020 World Congress of Public Health and the 2021 European Public Health Conference. So I've included some examples of impact of our activities to date, which we've picked up. So our initial rapid assessment of vulnerability to COVID-19 at the country levels, widely cited, and many other studies have looked to adapt similar methods or to reproduce our study at different levels. And it's been cited as a case study by the Association of Schools of Public Health in the European region. Our methodology paper was also widely discussed in the WHO roadmap for prioritising the use of COVID-19 vaccines in the context of limited supply in their policy brief. And I can't speak for the other countries, but for within Scotland, it's been used for within country pandemic management by our Scottish Government. And as I mentioned before, many countries have published COVID-19 DALY studies that are out with our network, have adopted or published guidelines as a means to carry those out, which is really helpful for us because it allows us to compare to studies that have been undertaken out with our network. And just to sum up, there's a forthcoming Nature News article which will feature the work of our cost action, focusing on the methods papers and the applied papers which have been published. Just included some links here if you want to keep up to date with our activities. Of course, we'd always welcome any new members if they would like to join. So we're very active on Twitter and LinkedIn with any updates, and we do have one of our main focuses is COVID, and although things have been changing, we don't intend to really slow down those efforts. So if you'd like to keep up to date with our work, please follow our social media streams. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant, for the presentation. And I think the European Burden of Disease Network is a perfect example of an action that has managed to deliver even more than what was originally in the work plan due to COVID. So this said, I would invite our next speaker, who is working and was working even before COVID on new working spaces. So our next speaker is Dr. Mina Di Marino from the Norwegian University of Life Sciences and Science Communication Coordinator on the geography of new working spaces and impact on the periphery cross-section. So please, Mina, the floor is yours. Thank you. We cannot hear you, Mina, sorry.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. It was very nice to hear until now the other experiences from our colleagues from our co-section project. Yes, I'm Mina Di Marino. I'm representing the co-section about new working spaces and impact on the periphery. As you can see from the first slide, I just show you our core group, and we are from all different countries in Europe, and of course also inclusive countries. And as my colleague mentioned before, since we started in October 2019, actually we had only 2 physical meetings. The first one was in Brussels and the second one was in Milan. And after that, most of all the MC meetings were arranged online. The next one in Utrecht in May will be hybrid. So actually we have experienced all these possibilities of online meetings, face-to-face, hybrid, and we have to see also that there are positive and negative advantages for our co-section. So we are around 30 course members plus 5 observers and more than 140 researchers involved so far. The aim of our co-section is, of course, to analyze actually the new types of working spaces. And this was already discussed very much before the pandemic. When we discussed about new working spaces, usually we don't know yet really a lot. Also because in the European report, we just discussed about people work from other locations, but we don't know yet which locations are working from. Can it be home? Can it be a working spaces? Can it be virtually? Can it be remotely? Can it be public libraries, coffee shops, and so on? So our aim was to analyze the different types, the locations, the effect on our well-being, the effect on social spatial context, economic context, and also looking at the policies of the European policies, the national policies that might support this kind of new working spaces. So as you can see here, the pandemic was for us kind of, another kind of reason to analyze these new working spaces, especially from the peripheries. Peripheries, which we mean, for example, urban peripheries or also rural regions, because as we know, a lot of people moved under the pandemic from the metropolitan areas to non-metropolitan areas. So, and this phenomenon is still ongoing. Of course, statistics reveal that these trends can continue, but of course we have to wait next analysis. So, so we started actually right away in October 2019, and in February, we had a first news about this pandemic. So as I can share here with you, we have to work under the pandemic with the analysis of the pandemic and also getting several impacts from the pandemic. So as you can see, we have to work on several impact on our WUJI groups because actually we are organizing an European workshop which will be held in May. It will be online, actually hybrid in Utrecht, and we are going to work and collaborate and discuss with the European representatives of several commissions, but also European joint European research centers, and also national policymakers, because we want to show what we have done so far in our course sections, looking at the new typologies of new working spaces, and especially all those spaces which have become more hybrid due to the pandemic. So this for us is very important to be discussed with them. And of course, another impact is about the working group number 2, because they are working actually on the direct, indirect effect of the new working spaces. The direct effect are on our well-being as individuals, but also the indirect effect are on our regions, on our planning, on our architecture, on our built environment. So it also the fact that, for example, using different new working spaces might reduce your commuting, your daily commuting, or changing definitely your travel and mobility patterns. So we have a lot of different effects that we have analyzed and also reported in our publications. And the third one, which is still very actual, is the need and relevance for European policies under and after the pandemic, because actually we knew going through the cross comparison analysis that several countries provided new policies, new incentives, financial incentives to support these new working spaces, okay? But also we have the awareness that some of the countries didn't do it. So we need also to look at this kind of possibilities, differences and similarities amongst European countries. And of course, we worked very closely to the coast section. We were monitoring our activities, and also the coast section was asking us to publish very much about that. We were very happy to contribute to the European discussion. So to the booklet that was introduced by Dominique earlier today. So we, for example, reacted immediately by opening a new Facebook page that was done by the Italian COST members. And this is still very used and very active Facebook page where a lot of people, users, managers, simple users, individuals, they just confront themselves about the experiences on working from other locations, which are not neither home or offices. And of course, we were contributing to the newsletters of the coast section as well. And here I want just to show you some outputs that we produced during the pandemic. First of all, is the edited volume for Routledge, and that was a series about cities, regions, and COVID-19. So we were very happy to contribute. Our book proposal was approved already 1.5 years ago, and now it's under press. It's under press, and we are very, very proud of this publication. But of course, we had a working paper, which is a result of the working group number 2. And they discussed very much about the effect of COVID-19 on the new working spaces in each country. And later, we have a lot of papers which have been published or still under review and so on, which are forthcoming. So just a few words about the working paper. That was the first, that was produced under the first wave. So immediately after that, so by May 2020, we asked our COST members to describe the impact of the COVID-19, what happened to their own countries. And we had the response of 17 countries, and we analyzed the differences in opening and closing of these new working spaces, the financial resources, and of course the different habits of people that they had to reduce the commuting, also because several times in many of the countries was not possible to move from one municipality to another. So what was the provision of these new working spaces in the peripheries and in the rural areas? The working paper will become part of the Springer publication quite soon, together with another working paper from the working group number 1. And of course, the Routledge book is for us a very important result. First of all, because there are not so many publications about that. Well, and then we had to situate the new debate under the pandemic, because we are pretty sure that we are changing our new working habit. And in the future, this working habit will be probably more flexible. So probably in addition to home and the offices, we are using other places for working. So we want to understand this from the planning perspective, economic perspective, but as I probably didn't mention before, this is a very multidisciplinary research networks. So we are analyzing this effect and this impact from different disciplines. And we are, of course, we are also going through very important comparative analysis. Most of these chapters, that there are 17 book chapters, are the result of cross-comparison analysis between several countries. This has not done yet in the literature, a very limited cases. So for us, it was a huge effort because, as you can imagine, during the pandemic, it was very hard to collect this data, but also because the cross-comparison analysis means that we need to analyze the context from the social, political, cultural context, and so on. And then during the pandemic, also the COST Action was asking us to develop a little bit more about the young, talented researchers and that are involved in our COST Action. And I just want to mention that 25 co-authors out of the 55 are young researchers. So for us, this is a very important objective: how to involve the young researchers, which are covering leading position as well as which members are so collecting data together with the most senior investigators. And during the pandemic, most of the international conferences that we organized were focusing on the impact of COVID-19. But what does it mean? It also means that we look at the gender perspective, the difficulty to reach the work-life balance, and of course the well-being, and what happened to the peripheries and the rural regions in our countries. So I have to say that so far there are more than 11, because we are going to organize more in the future. But the thing is that this was for us, as Angelo mentioned before, the COVID-19 became another topic in addition, on the top of the topic that we're supposed to analyze. And other outputs are about the podcast inspired by the working paper of the WUG2, the effect. We are still interviewing a group of course members 3 by 3 to analyze the impact of COVID-19, also the most current ones. And those podcasts will be out very soon. In addition to that, we have opened also a YouTube channel to collect all the videos where we're discussing about the impact. And also we organized in 2020 13 webinars. And I just want to show you something about that. The 13 webinars involved experts, so academics, non-academics, also stakeholders, policymakers from different countries, as you can see here, from America, UK, Portugal, France, Norway, Finland, Hungary, and so on. And we try also to involve different representatives of the society. So I have to say that this COST Action really produced a lot of scientific, but also societal impact. And we are very proud of it, because a lot of co-workers, also managers, users, and other kind of spaces are now collaborating with us. And as you can see from this slide, we are just listed, but there are our links to the website if you want to get other information about the topic of each of these webinars. And there was a special focus on rural co-working, and we are still working very much on the rural co-working spaces and all the kind of peripheries, also the most urban peripheries, let's say that. And of course, because we started in 2019, what was the probably not negative, but I have to say there was a big challenge for us, the organization of all the STSMs. So we were able, in between the pandemic, in between the waves, to arrange the physical exchange mobility, as COST Action was recommended to do, in addition to the virtual grant mobility. So with a lot of effort, we did it. And I think that was very beneficial, because at a certain point we need to meet physical. Also because these analyses cannot be done all the time online. We need to visit the spaces, we need to visit the neighborhood, the rural areas, having contact with people which are using the space, also the surrounding areas, and also having exchanges with your colleagues that are hosting you. So we did our best to do it. And of course, the summer school is also another important outcomes from us. The first 2 summer schools were organized online, but we are lucky to announce that the third one we are going to approach in July. It will be physical. in Milan. So yeah, and all the partnerships actually were developed under COVID-19. And we realized that these online, let's call it digital initiatives and digital network, on one hand was very, very productive. Probably we couldn't have so many collaborations, but now we really need to go back to the physical space and to the maybe also some hybrid collaboration that would be also okay. And during the pandemic, we collaborated with different associations, research groups working on the topic, but also with new research teams like the Marie Curie ETN, which working on exploring the impact of collaborative working space in rural peripheral areas. In this case, this European project is working as mainly for training PhD students. A lot of our course members are also members of this project. So it's very important for us to collaborate with them. And then, yes, just to finish with some links, as my colleagues did it, if you want to just follow us, just link to our social media. But thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, Mina, for the presentation. And it's very timely to work on new working spaces during these years. So the floor is open for questions that speakers and attendees can formulate through our Q&A section in Zoom. I actually would have a question first for Chiara. Who, as we said, has started and coordinated the network of actions with the support of Dominique. And you mentioned more than 3,000 researchers in the initial 9 actions. So how challenging was it to coordinate so many people and so many minds? And what was the added value of such large coordination?
Well, of course, at the beginning was problematic because we need to identify some key topics because otherwise everyone would like to pursue his or her own research. So the big challenge at the beginning was to identify 6 or 7 research areas where each one can be placed. So each researcher can choose one main research area, epidemiology, diagnosis, treatment, drug development, and eventually a second area. And so then we can have the possibility to work with a smaller group that makes things very easy. Each group has a coordinator, a vice coordinator, and so that could be easy. But at the same time, in the meeting between the different groups, we have the added value of the complementarity of expertise. So the same problem can be seen after different perspective. And that is very important because I'm not, a social scientist. I'm a biochemist, and having a discussion with scientists involved in social analysis, impact on changing in lifestyles was very, very useful for me, also as a person and as a scientist.
Thank you, Chiara. And I would ask a question about interdisciplinarity, but mostly also about cultural factors to Marcin and Mina. So if you have experienced cultural factors with regards to public debate and impact on working spaces in relation to COVID, of course. So I don't know if Mina wants to.
Yes, yes, I can go first. Actually, yes. Actually, during the waves, we noticed the different approaches of each country to the COVID pandemic. And this for us was very important to be analyzed because the restrictions were kind of, for some countries were very compulsory. And for example, for other countries were only recommendations. So I can just say the difference between the Nordic countries and the south of Europe. It also did affect very much also the way we were working, because for some countries were just recommended to stay at home or avoiding traveling, for example, commuting, but in other countries that was so rigid. And I think also this impacted very much the way of life, the daily life. On the other hand, also there's a cultural approach to the way we have been working in the last 20 years. There are countries where there is a huge investment on digitalization, and countries also where the culture of flexible way of working has been already established for years. In other countries, the COVID pandemic, I have to say, that was accelerated actually this way, this flexibility. So I have to say that this was quite positive, because we try to see also how we can shift from one way to another one of working, but also how to come back to the traditional way of working. But I think a lot of countries realize that this digitalization is extremely important for the society itself. And I think this is a very common denominator amongst the countries. But then, yeah, there are also other factors about cultural habits. So the fact that in some countries it's easier to collaborate online. It was already easier before the pandemic. In other countries has been a new way of working. So yes, I have to say that the COVID pandemic was for us both negative and but very positive from the terms of scientific approach and cultural approaches.
Thank you, Mina. And Marcin?
So thanks for this question. So we, in the book, we have cases from the Southern European countries, so Italy, Spain, Greece, Malta, but also from Great Britain and from Israel. And just like Mina said, that it's curious that, you know, Italy was the first country affected, so it was the first country to have a strong debate and very strong measures. Then there was this time of confusion, and then something materialized, and it's still with enormous differences. So we know that in Eastern Europe, there is much more resistance to any public measures, and they were not implemented by the governments. While in some countries like Portugal, where I live, they are rule followers. There was not really much public contestation. So one paper we have, it's not really cultural difference, but it also bears out culturally. It's analyzing the debate in Great Britain, analyzes 4 main newspapers. So The Guardian, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, and the Times. And one of the dilemmas of public policy over COVID, what was important and easily can be captured by this dilemma between lives and livelihoods. So between public health and the state of and the health of economy, so to speak. So do we take drastic, like a lockdown measures, shut down the economy, what China is doing now, for example, in lockdowns, or do we kind of take a more permissive attitude and allow some level of public illness, so to speak, for the COVID to dissipate, but then open economy? And so I wouldn't be able, based on empirical data that we have, say that there is really cultural difference, but there is definitely ideological difference, and we can see that. And perhaps again, there is a difference between the Nordic countries and the Southern countries, or between the Eastern European countries, these 3 groups. But there is also definitely an ideological difference, and this bears out in the research we've made, just doing discourse analysis of different approaches.
Thank you, Marcin, and thanks, Mina. So if there are no questions in the section, I do have actually one burning for Grant, to which the answer will be difficult, I warn you. And it is how long will it take to estimate the impact of COVID on DALYs?
So in terms of, do you mean the full pandemic, or
yes,
just the COVID infection?
Before we know how much the pandemic has affected the health of all of us.
So yes, very difficult, as you anticipated. So one of the main reasons why that's difficult is, I'll use the example of Scotland. So we undertake an independent national assessment, which means that we utilise the care service use data and national surveys which we have in Scotland, which means that we have certainty over what we can and can't measure. Because a lot of these disease models are based upon care service utilisation, because care service utilisation got so impacted by COVID, and many people didn't obviously get to GP appointments, etc. Then artifactually, if we then model that data, it's going to look like the needs have decreased. So I think just kind of going on, it's very difficult using routine data. We could probably tell better using national surveys and such like, which is what we commonly do to get estimates of things like depression and other mental health conditions, because routine care records isn't very good for that, or also for things like musculoskeletal conditions. Whereas for the chronic conditions like heart disease, which commonly require care use, then obviously we've got the DALYs are quite good, because we do miss out, although we would miss out the morbidity aspect, the need is there if people are dying early, so we do pick up both sides. But to get the kind of comprehensive picture, I think it will take time. And another aspect of that is the competition between different causes of death. So we might, because of the way which we allocate burdens, so it would be based upon what the main or underlying cause of death would be. Then obviously with COVID and with vaccinations, we're seeing a shift from maybe the underlying cause being COVID to this more kind of COVID being maybe someone dying of something else, but COVID being a part of that causal chain. So until those causes of death start to stabilise, then any sorts of estimates might be difficult to interpret, because we know that like with respiratory deaths have went down, but that's really because of within Scotland anyway, but that's because of competition. It's not because people don't have those underlying respiratory needs. So I think we just need to be quite careful about how we interpret these changes. And from our perspective, we're not looking to do that too quickly. Obviously, we want to do it as soon as we can, but we just need to keep in mind that we don't want to produce any misleading estimates. Thanks.
Thank you, Grant. And thanks to all the speakers.